So this particular vodka event is totally mainly focusing on mobile applications. So we thought, why not we start with test strategy, wherein you will understand what are the key necessary things really important in terms of when you go to mobile world and you start testing your application. So before we start, let's start with a quick introduction of ours. So I'm Brijendra. I'm a senior consultant in ThoughtWorks and over 10 years of experience in testing software applications. Over to Devyani.
Hi all, I'm Devyani. I have around 8 years of experience into quality and I'm also senior consultant QA in ThoughtWorks. I'm glad we all are here today and let's enjoy this whole cycle. Thank you.
Okay, continuing further. So before I delve into the details of test strategy, I just want to understand why do you think a test strategy is really important? Any thought? You can put it on chat, or if you want to say something, maybe you can unmute yourself. I just want to hear some certain opinion. Okay, the roadmap for entire test cycle to make testing efficient. Okay, makes sense. So the overall objective is to see a clear picture, like what laying ahead in front of us while we go into mobile application and testing those things, because this mobile world is very uncertain and a lot of things are happening. As everyone knows, like mobile industry has taken all over the world, and in the last fast emerging industry in terms of technology businesses, and everything has moved to mobile. Like you can watch videos, you can listen music, you can call, phone, SMS, chat, financial, education, whatnot. You can do everything. And with that, every business, every application wants to move into the mobile world. And once it does that, then it becomes really very critical necessary for us to test and certify those application builds for our customer client, so that their business and their main thing is running fine. And in this mobile world, what is happening with this continuous demand, even clients and customers are asking a very fast deliveries and very fast paced development. And we need to make sure like we're covering each and every scenario, permutation, combination, user data, whatnot, mobile network and everything. So this guide will help you in terms of understand, once you write your test strategy, what actually you need to do. What are the steps you need to follow? So before we go into the process, let me ask you further more questions. So how do you build your mobile test strategy or any test strategy? Any thought?
Depending on the nature of application, whether it is API focused, UI focused, or the looking at the specific nuances of that application.
Correct. Any other answer or any other thought? Not a problem. So I'll move forward. So if you are, looking for a template available in your organization, or if you're asking your colleague, or if you're looking online to prepare a test strategy, these are certain anti-patterns. And do you see any problem in this approach if you're doing something like this? So there is a problem. Why there is a problem? Because what happens in mobile world or in any other application as well, individual software and business solutions may have their own set of requirements, and we cannot fit and say like one particular solution will work for any other application or solution. So you may really need to understand your application in depth, your business in depth, in terms of building your own test strategy. So maybe you can refer those things in terms of taking certain ideas, but you should not blindly follow those solutions available. Okay, you should really ask certain questions. And what those questions should be, like, first you should understand who are the various stakeholders on which quality is dependent. If you understand this thing, once you know who are the quality stakeholders, then you can do some kind of RACI matrix analysis. So what is this RACI matrix is? It's actually an exercise where you will understand who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed for various other tasks that you may have in your project life cycle. And also, while you go to this SDLC process and STLC process, there are various processes and steps here that you are following sequentially or parallelly. So you really need to understand what are the criteria once you say certain task is done. So you need to create certain kind of definition for yourself so that everyone agreed on that definition and there is no conflict. And also, since this is going to be a fast-paced development, as mobile, everyone wants to come fast. So you need to have a CI/CD pipeline. And if you have CI/CD pipeline where you maintain and do various environment deployment and your production deployment, everything, and there might be various checks running. So you need to ensure like each and every process, whatever you're defining, is already thought through and consulted with various stakeholders, so that and advanced steps can be taken to take care of those things, so that you pick a perfect pace to start with. There is no further backlog once you start building your application. And also, knowing the release frequencies are also really very important, because if your release frequency cycle increases, then you have to build some kind of study regression solution for you. Why? Because if supposing within 1 week or 2 weeks or in a month or 2 months, like whatever your release frequency cycle, if you are going to production, then each and every time you have to certify like whatever you have built previously is working fine. So you cannot do everything manually, correct? You may need to think about automation process and everything. So this really makes or gives you certain insight in terms of deciding what should be your strategy in terms of building those things. And also, while you decide your testing processes based on client necessity and importance and pain point, you may also try and understand what might be the bottleneck for your product development. So you might think you need certain practices, but they might be creating certain kind of bottleneck for business to function properly or making going to production like in correct time. So you also need to think through what might be a bottleneck, and you need to provide an alternate way for those things. And also, very important thing like legal requirements. So every business, any application that you are developing is satisfying certain kind of business needs, correct? And if there's a business, there might be legal requirements also associated with those businesses, and it becomes really important and critical financially as well, that you understand those legal requirements and you ensure those guidelines and rules are maintained throughout the software development, as well as while things goes into production, those things are maintained. And while you discuss all those things, there might be certain failure point that if you think in advance, then you may think about the risk strategy or maybe the alternate solution. So think about those things as well. And there are certain other questions like what if quality is not maintained, then who will be responsible? What kind of thing you will do? Suppose if you have some minimal viable product that you want to launch as a first deployment to production, and suppose if you get if you don't get much good feedback, or if you get constructive feedback from your business or customers, then what you may do in order to accommodate those feedbacks, and how will you maintain the quality? Who will be responsible? Who are going to do the RC, and how you are going to correct the process? So if you create this framework and structure, then it becomes very easy to accommodate any feedback that is coming, and it will absorb some kind of pressure and heat that a team might be getting. And also, in technical terms, you need to understand the architecture as well, like what kind of tools, tech, and technology that you're using. Is it a serverless, it's a cloud, if it is a on-premise. So what kind of things you are using, which kind of languages you're using, what is the team's capability in terms of whichever tech things that you're choosing, and how you will adjust yourself. Do you need a ramp up? Do you need training, or so whatnot? So whatever you are thinking, so have a thought on architecture perspective as well. Any question till this part? If you're not able to unmute yourself, then feel free to ping over the Zoom chat as well. And if you have any question in between, you can write anytime, like whichever questions you have. We'll address those things once we are, or once we see that. So I'll move on. So in previous slide, I explained like you can, once you understand the business requirement, everything, you can go ahead with RACI Matrix. Some of you might not be aware of what RACI Matrix is, so I'll just give a little bit of insight on it. So RACI Matrix, what it does, so you may have certain tasks in your software development lifecycle, correct? And those tasks may be something like someone is doing the requirement refinement. Someone might be writing a story, someone might be creating test scenarios, someone might be writing a code for it, and so there are multiple processes that is involved. So I'm just taking a basic examples based on a project and things. You can consider there might be multiple tasks, and there are multiple roles and persons in your team as well. So for a particular task, who will be responsible, who would be accountable, who will be consulted? Suppose it's something related to unit test. So what do you think? Who will be responsible for unit test? Developers, correct? You would say developers are responsible for unit test, but accountable, is only developer accountable for unit test? So you may say, no, QA can also be accountable for unit test, because these are some kind of automation for you, which or the quality gatekeepers for you, where you can define your quality, correct? So you can say developers are responsible for unit test, but QAs are accountable. And who can be consulted? So QAs can also be consulted. They are accountable and they can also be consulted. So if developers feel, and if they think there might be, or if QA thinks if there are more permission combination in terms of not code coverage, but logic coverage is available, then you can also always consult your developer to include more unit tests, correct? And who can be informed? So your project management, your project manager, tech lead can be informed about how you're writing your unit test and what is the code coverage and everything. So I've just given a very basic example, but if you do this exercise, if for individual task, if you mark who is responsible, accountable, consulted, then in further development of the product, you will never face this situation where you think like whom you should reach out to for any particular task. So there are there might be some unsaid thing, but if you do this exercise, those gray area is cleared. Now you will have things in black and white. Okay, I'll just read through certain chats. Okay, so okay, cool. Moving on to next part. So business priorities. So so right now we have discussed like in terms of what we think as a QA or developer or a BA, like we might be thinking, but we need to come out from our role responsibility and think in a holistic view. And we should ask certain questions to our client and try to understand what they are most worried about. What are the things that we are going to solve for them? How our solution will make their life easy. If we ask these questions, then we'll work on that direction, and that will make client happy. And in terms, if client is happy, then the product, whichever he thought of, we are building on that directions. And also we should also think about who might be the implicit user and what are the risk appetite of the client in terms of anything happens. So suppose if client is not at all willing to take any kind of calamities in production, then what kind of backup plans do you create? You need to come up with some kind of backup plans as well. Or if something happens, then how will you mitigate it? So maybe you can reach out to your some leadership team to understand what kind of things can be developed. Okay, now from here on, I'll hand over to Devyani. She will tell you more about the very specific in terms of when you're building a strategy for mobile devices.
Brijendra, I think we have one more question from Sushant, if we can take it.
Yeah, so it says, what if the client doesn't want to invest in unit test and go live is a priority?
Okay, so if client is saying go live is a priority, then unit test is not an optional thing. You need to educate your client. It's never an optional thing. So if you're following a TDD approach, then first you write unit test, then you write your implementation. So if client is saying go ahead without writing unit tests, then you say it's not just at all possible. In the beginning, if he's really very keen to go into the production very fast, then you educate them. So even if you're able to launch your product in fast manner, but that might be buggy, and if that makes a success, then further implementation will cause a lot of problem, and your second release might be much more delayed than you anticipated. So you need to make your base very quality effective, and you need to educate client in terms of, so there are certain things that you cannot never negotiate, correct? So these are those certain things that you should educate your client on to.
Okay, I hope that answers, and even not, you can keep posting the questions and we'll take that ahead. Thank you so much, Brish, for walking us through a lot of things here. So let's just move on to the identifying your app. So let's suppose we are already building a test strategy and now we already know the business requirement and everything. What is that next question which is coming to us is identify your app. Is my app native? Is my app hybrid? Is my app web app? So what do we mean by native application, right? So application which you can install onto your mobile device. All of us must have a lot of apps installed onto the mobile device, which are related to your mobile device memory. Then you explicitly go install or update those apps. They're built on Swift, Kotlin, React Native, and so on, right? So if even you might have even heard it, right, that a native development happens, right? It happens on the Swift, it happens on the Kotlin. So when we are taking that example, what is happening there, right? The apps are building on the different platforms, on the different languages. And in that way, you will not have a cross-platform benefits there, right? Let's suppose even in native app, someone says that let's build app on the React Native, where we are going for a cross-platform. So the language will be one, and it will support both the platforms, right? And so on. There will be a lot of combination based on whatever language, tech stack you're choosing into the native. But like I said, you explicitly go there and you install the application, are treated as a native application. Let's go to the web application before we talk about hybrid. So web apps are the apps which are browser compatible applications, web applications, right? So all of us already know, like let's take example of any banking system, right? You also have application which you install, and you also have a URL which you hit on the web browser, right? So let's suppose there is only a web version available where you go back and you're hitting it into the mobile. You open the Chrome or any browser you have and you hit that URL, right? So it is browser compatible URL you already have of that web application. Let's talk about a hybrid application. So it's a combination of your native and web application. A lot of us might have even saw this already happening, that you already have application installed, you open few URLs there and it opens into the web views. So they are a compatible URLs, and that is where that apps are treated as a hybrid applications. So I hope this sounds good. If not, feel free to post the questions. So meanwhile, we'll just move ahead with, I think we can talk about the examples as well. So native application is somewhere you go back to the Play Store and you install. So like I said, let's take example of maybe Facebook, right? You go back and you install the app version. You go to Play Store, you go to App Store, you install that particular application. Even for the web application, for that matter, let's talk about some banking application, right? Net banking application, right? You go into the browser, you should hit the URL of that banking application. It's a web app for you. And hybrid, let's take the same example of banking. Like let's suppose HDFC, you go back to App Store, Play Store, you install the app. A lot of you might have even faced this issue, right? That a lot of time you open the application into the device and it still asks you, do you want net banking? The time you click, it opens into the Chrome. Even a lot of bank offers that functionality as well, right? So it is supported on your App Store, Play Store. At the same time, on your Chrome or whatever browser you have into the mobile application, it opens there as well for you. So that is how the division is. I hope that answers the question. If not, still post the questions. So even I think Flutter, it is also treated as a cross-platform application. Like you implement something and it will be supported on both the sides. So you can definitely go for a native for that, where it can be installed via App Store and Play Store. Native applications or hybrid apps. So even I think a native application, one of the example could be, you go for maybe Amazon, even for that matter, right? It's a native application. You go to the Play Store or App Store and you install that application, right? That can also be treated as a hybrid application. So you see that contact us, or in the mobile application, you see that some web views are getting opened inside the app, right? So that is your example of a hybrid application, where you have a native application like Amazon, you have a different menus into that, and you click on that, and even for that matter, chatbots, right? They are usually integrated into the application. So they are not the independent identity as such, but you click on those and they're integrated via web there. So that could be one of the example. Even you go back, open the Amazon or Flipkart, right? You will see that option popping in. So it is not really developed as such inside, but they are like a web views integrated there into the native. Yes, so the Amazon can be treated as both hybrid as and native, because it can be installed via Play Store and App Store, and at the same time, if you see, it has a web views also added to it, so it can be treated as a hybrid as well. So it's not really a specific where we say it's a native because it also has that integration with the web views. So that is how it is hybrid for us. Yeah, so I think like Pinaki definitely pointed a correct thing to us. A contact us or chatbot where, you know, integration happens. You click on that particular thing, not necessarily it is developed inside the application, right? It can be that you're calling some third-party integration application, and those are web views for you. So it's something like you configure the URLs. The only difference is when you click on that particular option, it doesn't open in Chrome. Inside the app, it renders it and it shows that UI to you. That is how you can figure out the difference there. Cool. I think let's move ahead, and if you have any question, we'll just take it in some time. Okay, so let's talk about a really vast thing here, which is a target platform. So though it sounds really a simple thing to us, but when we actually had a mobile projects, we had many more learnings coming in when we talked about the target platforms, right? So like it shows on the UI to us, like we have many kind of a brand supported into the mobile application for both Android, right? For huge vast type of brands, a lot of OS support is available there as well, right? Let's talk about iPhone, right? We have a many iPhone support available, iPad, iPod, or whatnot, right? So it is really important for us to understand what all devices we are going to support, what all OSs we are going to support, because like Bridge mentioned, it's a vast world. You can't really say this much is my scope, right? You don't know what new thing is coming into the OS. So now let's talk about the examples here, right? So when we are talking about, let's go for the project where they say, I'm only going to support Android phone and iPhone. That's it. I don't want to support iPad or iPod. So we said, okay, no problem. Let's go ahead with the requirement. We started developing. And then we understood one important thing when we were going to part to production. And the thing was, App Store clearly has a guideline. It says, the time you support anything on the iPhone, you have to support the same application in iPad and iPod. It should be compatible. Now, though our developers are saying will not really support it explicitly, being a QA here on the team, it's now my responsibility. I have to really test it, because it's my App Store guideline. The time it is failing on my iPad, iPod, they'll just reject the application, right? So that cautious decision which you take when you understand the guidelines and you have that project requirement as well, right? We have to think about everything. So let's talk about the different sizes of the devices as well, right? We have a lot of different size of devices. So how you support that, how UI is getting rendered there, right? Do you have to swipe it? One of the key example where we talk about the OS selection, right? We observe that in Android, that OS 7, whenever we are adding a certain type of animations or gestures like loader, shimmer, right? OS 7 of Android clearly says I can't support shimmer. You have to add loaders for me. But the business requirement for us was to support shimmer. So now we had to support shimmer for OS 8 and above, but for less than 8, we had to support loader. So being a QA, I also have to think about that division as well there, right? So also a lot of time we heard a lot of newses as well, right? So this year a lot of brands like a Samsung and so on, they said we will have our own OS on OS 12. So we heard that news, and when we say that they will go for their own OS, that means they will have the Android on the base, but they'll have a wrapping on top of that. Same thing happened when Huawei last year declared that they are going to go for a whole change where they are going to have their own OS for everything. And then now that is a call which QA has to take. Do I really have to test it on Huawei now? Because Huawei is still undergoing the changes of that platform. If I really have to make that change happen, right? What I should consider? Do I have to tell my business that I can't support it for 3 months because they still have to deploy the things? So we have to take that logical call. So it's when we say target platform, it's a combination of multiple devices, multiple brand you support, multiple OSs are available on the go. And also if there is anything specific, minimum OS, maximum OS requirement, we usually talk about those as well, because a lot of us already know that not every platform will allow upgradation of OS. Not every brand will allow that, right? After a certain point, a particular brand will say, I'll stop support for this device. I'll stop support for this OS. So being a QA, we have to be considerate about everything. When we go to the project, we'll eventually understand it by looking at the statistics of devices, that what are the crucial devices used by my customers. That is a different thing. But the time we are starting, we have to be considerate about a lot of things, and there are many more to that. So with this, I'll just go ahead with another slide and the next topic. And if anything is there, like just pop up the question, please. Okay. So we'll talk about now. Let's suppose we talked about everything about the target platform. You already know what we have to support, what we have to do. Let's talk about what device I have to select for testing. Now I'm a QA on the team. Now I have to tell from the test strategy point of view, what all devices I'm supporting. Can I just test everything on emulator? Right, for Android? Can I just test everything in the simulator? Where what happens, right, when you open an emulator, it mimics the behavior of that particular device configuration, whatever you are choosing, right? Same goes for simulator. When you choose the iOS and there is a real device, right? So do I have to just say that I tested everything on the emulator, I tested everything on the simulator, it looks good to me? Is it enough? What is that something which real device has to offer? What all things real device can offer us? Let's understand it pretty well, right? So when we talk about an emulator, you are going to Android Studio, maybe you are going to Xcode, you are mimicking the device, and you are just starting something up. When we are testing anything, you are clicking via mouse clicks, right? So clickable area is quite small for us. But let's talk about a real device, right? Different people with the different devices might face a fat finger issue. What we mean by fat finger issue is when you tap any key, and if someone has a big finger, that area might not be touchable, right? So it is important for us to also consider real device when you're going for any of the deployment, because that is going to be must for you. So with that, I think I'll just move to the another slide. Yeah, so I think we also have a lot of custom settings to consider when it comes to mobile. A custom setting where a lot of people would prefer a dark mode over a light mode. A lot of us already prefers that, right? So whatever colors, UI or font style, font size I have, right, I have to make sure that it is supported in both of the modes. Sometimes you can't just have any of the funky design style added, right? Depends on your application. If it is a banking, you can't really go and have many experience and exposures to the different things. Few people might feel comfortable, turning their phone into the landscape mode because they like using it in that mode. So you have to be considerate, and you have to support even that modes of the custom settings. And there are many more custom settings, but we just thought that these could be used by many applications. So we just tried popping it up for all of us here. Let's also talk about the interruption. Mobile world is different than web, because when you are on a web application, you might not receive any call or SMS. You will definitely have the notifications and stuff going on, but call, SMS can happen into the mobile world. So if you are using any application and some interruption happens, like phone, SMS, you have to make sure that you still support the application. Application is not frozen or it is not dead. You still seamlessly work on it. There could be many more interruption which OS and device and brands can cause based on whatever implementation they have. So you have to be considerate enough about the application and what all interruptions you have there. So let's talk about a really interesting area here, which is a specific conditions. We'll definitely take that question, Sushant. But I'll just explain this and then we'll take the question. So specific conditions, let's talk about the specific conditions where we are talking about a network connectivity. We know different people have a different Wi-Fi setting, maybe 2G, 5G, anything they can have. Then they can have a different network speed. Some people could be living in a remote area, have a flaky internet connection. So we have to really make sure every time that, whatever network connectivity I have, my app should be able to return back to its stage, right? It should not be frozen, it should not be failed. So it is really important for us to really consider that as a network connectivity options. There are a lot of options there where we talk about the specific conditions on the mobile, and we have to test and make sure everything works. But we are going to take really interesting and crucial area here, which people might not really get clicked, but it is update and backward compatibility. So let's suppose you have one application on the production, which is 1.1.0, and you are going to get 1.2.0 as a version update, and QAs are going to test it for the production. So what do we mean by update? A lot of us might have already seen on App Store and Play Store that, when new update comes, you get update button there. You click on the button, you get the next version available there. What happens meanwhile, right? So the on 1.1.0, a 1.2.0 will come, right? It will get updated and installed on top of that. Even in that case, if 1.1.0 have one API, 1.2.0 has some API changes, we have to make sure that you are able to update the application properly. Also, whatever is working on 1.1.0 should work on 1.2.0, and it should be backward compatible. One of the crucial example of this is, you might have seen updates on the Amazon, right? The time you click on the update, one of the key area which we have to really concentrate on is, you will be still logged in. Your order details will still be maintained. If something is getting shipped, it is still getting shipped and getting maintained, right? What is that thing? The thing is, you update the application, but your login data is still stored. All of the necessary details of the user are still stored. You're not asking user to log out and log in. So you also have to think about a lot of business scenarios there when we are talking about the update scenario, what all more things can get added, right? And there could be many more to that, but these are something crucial whenever you want to go to production or before you want prod, right? You have to be considered about these all requirements, because you can't really just log out the user and say every update log me in, right? Or you give the API which is broken on now for 1.1.0. So backward compatibility and update are definitely crucial to us. So with that, let's talk about the testing types. We just try giving some examples here. A lot of us already know about a lot of testing types. There could be more than this, but we are going to talk about a specific testing type here, which you see as accessibility testing. And in mobile world, it is a ISO standard. You have to support the accessibility testing, but based on what your application demands. So accessibility for a challenged people, where they are not, maybe let's take example where people are not able to see, and they need some support in the application with the swipe and key gestures, right? You have to make sure that you support it, because it is also a guideline. But like Brij said, right, if there is any application where application is run by a drivers, they are my users, then in that case, does my accessibility testing takes a priority? Maybe not, because they'll not even get the license in one first go if they are challenged, right? So everywhere, based on your project, business requirement and user requirements, right, your testing times will get prioritized or a little deprioritized, and we have to take that cautious call. So we are going to talk about the path to production now. This is really interesting area compared to web application. All of us already know that we develop some stories, we build it, QAs go back and they test it. What is that difference into the mobile than web? So in web, you usually deploy and everyone can just access it and so on, right? But mobile world is different. If everything looks good to you, you being a QA says, it looks good to me, I'm good to go to the production. But now, because it's, let's take example of a native application, it's your mobile application. What is that something you have to still consider? Because you have to publish your application to App Store and Play Store. Now you have to submit your application to them. So they review it. So App Store clearly says, I will install your app, I'll manually test it. If it looks good to me, I'll give you approval. That is how the App Store guidelines are. So even we have to know the guidelines so that we will know how much time it will take for us to go to the production. So in this case, you submit the application to App Store, Play Store, they give the approval, and then you roll out to the customer. Even in rolling out to the customer, you can choose, do I have to roll out to whole customer base in one go? If there is some crucial functionality where you just say, I have to get the feedback and, just see how it works, people can also choose to go for phased rollout. So they call it as a phased rollout, 1%, 2%, based on the days it will have the setting in App Store and Play Store, and that works like that. So with that, let's just move to the interesting area. We're going to combine this automation testing, where I think Rich called about a test pyramid, about the unit tests and integration tests and UI tests, right? We are going to see these all, how it is getting mapped to the test pyramid on the high level. So based on your project requirement, you will find out that unit test and snapshot test is important to me. Integration is important. Maybe infra is not, right? Based on your project requirement, business requirement, you'll have that all. And based on wherever you feel my test should go onto the layer, you have to map it. And all of us already know the time a pyramid goes up, time to fix is getting increased, right? And you are getting a late feedbacks. So it is really important that you take a cautious call and you set that test on the path. Like Brij also mentioned one thing about, I have to educate people if they say that this doesn't work for me, right? And being a QA, we have to always be on the toes and say and explain to the people why it is really important to us and to the business and to my application, right? So with that, I'm good with this. I'll just pass control to Brij. Over to you, Brij.
Thank you, Devyani. Let's quickly have a look at the pending questions if you have any. Okay, cool. We don't have any questions.
I think we have one that Sushant asked. I'm not sure. Did we answer that? Can we automate the custom settings?
Yes. You can automate custom settings. So based on the framework you choose, you want to change it to landscape, you want to turn off the Wi-Fi, right? Not every, but whatever are crucial, you can still automate those. So few frameworks allow it as a commands. For few frameworks, you might have to write that automation script to do it, but it is possible.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question here. Like supposing we have different phases of the application. So if we test this custom settings for the first phase, do we still need to go and test it in the following phases as well?
So you mean that you tested it once when you got the requirement, but you want to know if I can still go and test it on production? Is that the question?
No. Like supposing in the first phase, I have tested this, like let's say I'm checking the dark mode, if it is working properly or not. I've checked the fonts and everything. So those kind of settings I have already checked in the first phase. Do I still need to go and check the same thing in the second phase as well?
In automation?
Maybe manual also, like to be still.
So it completely depends on the requirement you receive. So if you see that, because a dark mode and light mode, it's really a specific thing, right? That you support fonts and styling and colors once, then they usually get adopted, right? That is how it works. If someone says that, no, for every component, I'm going to change it, in that case, maybe you have to understand if it impacts the requirement, if they change it in the further. But if they say, I have written the component, this is going to work for everything, in that case, you can decide based on your team maturity if you want to do it or not.
So there might be certain one-time configuration involved, but you need to at least test those settings at least once. Yes. To ensure those one-time settings are working fine or not. And if you're using reusable component, so if you have changed setting in reusable component, then if you're using that component later on in your application, then you're sure like things are working fine. But if you are introducing new component, then it becomes necessary to test those custom settings with that particular new component as well. So if you understand your architecture, if you're in continuous talks with your developer, if you understand things, then you may reduce some rework that you are doing in terms of testing. If you understand the things properly, if you don't, then you have to do everything blindly like a black box. Okay, so later on, we'll try and understand how we can go about doing that gray box as well in this session. So right now we have discussed like what needs to be considered in terms of defining your test strategy, but we also understand that automation is a very crucial part. And in that automation, we understood we understand like this UI and API automation also plays a major role, because we have to certify how application user interface is looking to the real customers, to the end customers. Correct. So if you talk about UI automation, then if you search on any medium, then you will find there are a lot of tools available. Correct. If you go about searching any API testing tools, then again there are a lot of testing tools are available. So how will you choose an automation tool for your application? So for that, you may do certain kind of you can again ask questions, do some kind of practices, you can do some kind of comparison. So what I'm trying to explain is you should not blindly choose, or based on other person's feedback, you should not choose an automation framework for you. You should always do some kind of analysis and research from your side as well, what might be a good fit for a particular need. So if you see right hand side of this particular deck, you find this tool comparison compared to what kind of application you're using. If it is a web application, native, hybrid, Android and iOS, it may happen that you are only targeting Android devices. It may happen, or it may also happen that you are only targeting iOS devices. Okay, and you may also targeting multiple frameworks. So if you choose any particular testing framework, then you have to understand what kind of environment does it support. And suppose while doing as analysis, if you come to a multiple tools, suppose for a particular requirement, suppose if I take an example of iOS. So iOS support is given by Execute Test, Calabash, Appium, Selenium with iOS driver. So a lot of tools are supporting iOS, but which would be the best fit for your particular need? How will you decide that? So for that, you may go ahead with Pugh Matrix analysis. So what this Pugh Matrix will tell you, so it will give you a strategy to do a tools comparison. So if you take an example of, we have given two teams example in here. So team A, team B. So team A have certain sets of requirements, some key criteria that they think their automation tool should be able to do for them. And similarly, team B have different set of key criteria and requirement based on their product. So what I'm trying to convey here is every product has its individual requirements and you cannot overlap things here and there. Okay, some might be price sensitive, some project might for them price don't matter. Some might be doing, so there are a lot of test suites, so you may have to do parallel execution. Somewhere you may go with a single execution or sequential execution as well. So a lot of things you may consider. So suppose once you identify, once you list down your key criteria, then you give importance to your key criteria. You give some kind of weightage. Any baseline you can set. So suppose if something is really very important for you, you give them a higher weightage. So you see in this particular example, we have this 5, 4, 3. So 5 means it has a greater weightage, means holds greater importance for a testing framework. Similarly, 4, 3 is a lesser importance. So based on that, you will list down your key criteria. Now, you may also know like which might be a trending tool or the most widely accepted or used tool. Suppose if you go to mobile world, then you may think Appium is that you might have heard earlier. So I'm saying before you choose Appium blindly, consider Appium as a baseline, because you know a lot of things about Appium, correct? So you choose that Appium as a baseline and you know what kind of things it's supporting in terms of a key criteria. Now you pick and choose the alternative automation tools that you might have identified, like Calabash or any other tool. And now you do a comparison with your baseline thing. So suppose if I take an example of pricing, okay, so it has importance of 5. And for Appium, it's kind of free. Suppose in terms of pricing. So if you pick any tool like Calabash or some other tool, then you also compare whether this tool is compared to Appium, is it costly or is it freely available? How is the community support? So based on that, you can rate it. So either you can mark it plus if it is over and above the baseline tool, or if you can mark it as minus if it is not meeting that expectation with baseline tool, or if it is same, then you can mark the same as. If you do this kind of exercise, then what you will have some plus and minuses and some similar things for your key criteria. Then you just take an count of the plus, like positive things, and count to the negative things and count to the same things, and you do this addition. So this tool 1 compared to your baseline tool has positive 6, has a negative 2, and same thing is 1. Now what you do, you take a weighted sum. Weighted sum means if it is a positive, then you add 5, or then again 5, and then again 4. So based on that weightage, you add that weightage, and then you see, and similarly you add the weightage for a negatives, and you do it for all the tools. Then by looking at this data at this point, whoever has a major positive things, you can go about choosing that tool as well. So instead of going with any feeling or hunch, this Pugh Matrix give you us a documented way of doing a research for you. And it will give us certain insights as well, like which might be the possible bottleneck coming into the future. And are you thinking about it? Okay, now moving next is, paradox of choices. So earlier I explained you that a lot of tools are available, correct? So I'm not saying you should go and search each and every tool available in the market, because if you do that, the list is quite exhaustive. And if you do comparison and do kind of this research, then you may you may be, very stressful, and it will eat up a lot of time of yours. So what I suggest is, whenever, for any situation, this principle is not just limited to the software testing or choosing any automation tool. It's applicable everywhere, even in your personal life as well. So having choices is great, but if you have too many choices for anything, then it is stressful. So understand this anti-pattern and limit yourself, and clear this thing for you. Create a guideline for yourself. It will save a lot of time for you. Now coming to the most important part of a test strategy is identifying your risk. So why risk? So if you do anything, if you plan anything, there might be risk involved. So they can be said risk, there can be unsaid risk, there might be some certain kinds of assumptions, there might be certain kinds of issues. So if you do this risk analysis based on RAID matrix, so you can read about it. We'll not try to cover RAID matrix completely in this talk, but the intention is to give an idea. There is a RAID matrix. Go read about it. It categorizes, it asks certain questions, and based on that, you can map your risk to these different 4 boxes, and gives you clear visibility, like what can be done with those risks and how will you create a mitigation plans. And last but not the least, understanding the importance of manual exploratory testing. So we have talked about the automation process, tools, and everything. But as you know, in mobile world, a lot of things, or majority of things, you would not be able to test or certify using automation, because there are a lot of interruption, a lot of things are happening. You are getting call, you're getting this, your memory up, your memory is very high, or memory is very less, or your device is heating up. A lot of things are coming up, correct? And with this given situations, I would say you should have a happy path or critical path in your automation. But once you go to a production, or once you certify or build, do some kind of exploratory testing as well, and list down your key criteria and your checklist, like whatever checks that you want to perform.